What's up, everybody? It's George Gabriel, and we're going to make your mix sound like the pros with parallel compression. Have you ever had a mix where you've spent so much time on the mix and it sounds good, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't gel? It doesn't feel like it's glued together. It doesn't feel like a record. It still feels like a demo. That's where parallel compression comes in. So what is parallel compression? Parallel compression is when you have a raw sound like a drum sound that doesn't have any effects on it, and you take that raw signal and you send it to another channel, and on that channel you squash it with very, very heavy compression. But what it does is it provides a glue and melds the sound together to get a really professional sounding mix. And you can do it with multiple instruments, and I'm going to show you how. Let's take a look. Okay, so I'm in Logic right now, and I decided to use the music I wrote for Who the Heck is George Gabriel that is on this channel and kind of illustrate how parallel compression works. Now, I have just taken it down to the drums, the bass, the rhythm guitars, and the solo guitars. So this is what we have so far. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to glue the sound of this band together. Because when you think about it, sometimes bands record at different days, different spaces. And what parallel compression does is it glues all those parts together to make them sound like a wall of sound. That's what we're trying to achieve here. And a lot of pros swear by parallel compression to make that excellent wall of sound mix. But first, we're going to start with the drums. Now, I played live bass and I played live guitars for this, but I programmed the drums using a Contact Studio drummer plugin. And so the drums by themselves sound like this. Okay, so it's a programmed drum part. And if we look at what I put on the channel, I just am ducking out one frequency on that drum. And if I look at my Contact plugin where I use the studio drum, I did some tweaking in the plugin itself, but all the levels for it are clean. So nothing is distorting, everything is nice and clean. So to apply parallel compression to a drum, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the raw sound, which is this drum, again, very few plugins, and I'm going to use my send, and I'm going to send it to sidechain 1. And the key is I'm going to send 100% of the raw signal to sidechain 1. So that is 0 decibels here, which is unity. Now my drums are already getting collected in a drum bus. And on that drum bus, I do have some very light compression using this Empirical Labs Fatso. And I do have a little EQ to kind of get that snare to come out a little bit more. But I want you to see the compression that I'm hitting it on the bus level because it is very light. You can see there's a little saturation coming in there, but it's very light. It's just providing a tiny bit of glue. What parallel compression does is it provides a lot of glue. And I'm going to illustrate that by showing you what I'm going to do on the sidechain level. So on my first sidechain, what I'm going to do is dial up an Empirical Labs distressor, really a very common plugin used for this kind of task. And I'm going to go and say, hey, I'm going to look at the drum buses and see what kind of things do you have that are going to squash that sound. Let's use Drum Room Crush and see what that does. Here's where parallel compression comes in. I have my drums being collected on the bus level here. That's going to my stereo out. But I also have my drums being sent to my sidechain at 100%, and that is also going into the stereo out. So you've got two areas, the raw sound and the bus sound, converging on the stereo out. The key to parallel compression is to actually start with your fader at 0 and pepper in the sound of that completely squashed sound. Let's see how this plug-in setting is squashing the sound just by playing the drums here. Okay, you can see it's on nuke and it's getting very compressed. If we were to solo that just to hear what it sounds like, this is where you're going to really identify that squashiness. That's really squashy, and what you hear is the kick and the snare are going way down, and the cymbals are kind of going up, so it's kind of this washiness. It's really compressing down the kick and snare, and yet it's letting the cymbals breathe. To illustrate what that does to glue your drums together, I'm going to bring this back down to 0. I'm going to unsolo this, and go ahead and pepper this squashiness in with the drums as they are. you can start to hear that squashiness come in and glue some of that sound together. Now, there's a couple ways you could do this. You could try to throw everybody, like the guitars, the bass, and everybody through that same heavily compressed sidechain, but that's not going to be effective because you're going to have to pre-mix all that. What I like to do is I like to send all the elements that I want to apply parallel compression on their own sidechains, so they each individually get their own compression that is completely slammed. And I will pepper them in individually. That's what's going to provide that sound. Now, if you're really going to be nitpicky, you probably want to listen to the squashy compression on each one of those instruments you're going to apply it to. But for the sake of what I'm showing you here, I'm just going to copy and paste this same slammed setting over to each one of the other areas. So let's go ahead and continue to the bass then. Here is the bass, just simply bust, again with very light compression and a little bit of EQ. Actually, it's not that lightly compressed. It's actually pretty heavily compressed. But what I'm looking to do is add another level of wash to this. So I'm going to copy and paste using my Option key over to where I'm going to put the bass, which is on this side chain. And I'm going to go ahead and take this down to 0. And on the bass track, I'm going to go to my sends and now send this to side chain 2 again at 100%, which is 0 unity. So now I'm going to listen to the drums and the bass and pepper in that completely smashed bass sound along with the drums. Now, what it's adding is some sustain to it, which is nice because I kind of like to think of this as an English muffin and peanut butter. The bass part, without the parallel compression, has got all the nooks and crannies. But when I put peanut butter over it, I smooth it all out. So, you know, breakfast. So the next up in applying this parallel compression is to my rhythm guitars. If I were to listen to the rhythm guitars by themselves without the parallel compression, this is what it sounds like. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, again, just copy and paste the same slammed plugin over, take my side chain down to 0, and then take these two rhythm guitars and send them to sidechain 3, again at 100% or 0. And now I'm going to pepper that in and see if I can get those guitars to sustain more with the rest of the mix. I don't know if you hear what's happening here, but what compression does, it takes the peaks and valleys and squashes them together. So in other words, if you have a full bandwidth file here and it's allowed to operate as normal, the more you squash it, what it does is it takes those soft elements and makes them louder, and it takes those peaks and squashes them down, thus kind of bringing that whole thing and compressing it together to be more of an even sound. And you can see I'm kind of using these sine shades as a little bit of a mix too, because the amount of washiness I'm going to add in, I'm going to bring it to the overall level of that instrument. So what you're doing is it's almost another separate area to add that parallel compression mix in to kind of balance your mix. So finally, I'm going to take the solos. Let's go ahead and take the solos. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select all of these and send them to my final side chain that's open right now at 100%. And then I'm going to take this side chain all the way down. Again, I'm going to copy and paste by using my Option key, the same slammed plugin. And let's go to a solo part here and pepper this in. Now I'm going to spend a little time, just a tiny bit of time mixing this right here, because these are my squashed elements. All right, let's do some A-Bing on this. Now, I will say that one of the biggest common mistakes used with compression is people think, oh, it's louder, so it's better. No, that's not really how compression works. Just because it's louder doesn't mean it's a better sound. In fact, it could be a worse sound, and yet you think it's better because it's louder. Number one mistake that people make with compression. What you want to do is you want the compression to kiss the audio and just make it gel together. The rule is if you can hear the compression, it's probably too compressed. Now, with parallel compression, you're kind of banking on some of that compression because you want that washiness together to feel like it's glued, that wall of sound. But you got to be careful because too compressed sounds like a bad mix. So it's riding the wave of how much of this I'm going to add into it to make it sound good, but not overdo it so it sounds like I've just beat the living daylights out of my mix. What I want you to do for the listening purposes of A-Bing this is try to do away with the fact that you're gaining some level from the parallel compression, but listen to the holes, listen to the crannies be covered by peanut butter in this. So here's that same section with no parallel compression. Now let's listen to that with the parallel compression. You can almost taste the peanut butter. Peanut butter. Now this is going to work different in different genres, but if you really are missing an element in your mix, you're like, it just doesn't all gel together. Parallel compression may be your answer. It's specifically good on vocals. It's specifically good on drums and bass, no matter what the genre is. And it's really good on acoustic guitars because sometimes you just can't get that acoustic guitar to really sing and get that sustain that you need. It just kind of sounds like demo-y. This will undemo-y your acoustic guitar. A little bit more A-Bing here. Let's take it out. Parallel compression, my friends. This may be the sauce that you need for your mix, or the peanut butter, whatever. So what do you think of this parallel compression? Is it something that you might want to try out to glue your mixes together? I think it's a very good tool used in the right ways. Remember, don't over compress. Use this to glue it together to get that gel where you can get that band, that wall of sound to happen. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Click the bell icon to be notified of future videos. And what is your thought on parallel compression? Is it something that you already use? Is it something that you think is good? Do you disagree with the way that I do it? I want to know. Leave that in your comments. And until next time, this is George Gabriel Music.